Regardless of who plays quarterback, who doesn't expect Oklahoma to light up scoreboards and run up big yardage totals all season as they do each and every year? Got Jason Ray on the line from Last Word on College Football to break down the Sooners for us. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, and now we get a quarterback in Spencer Rattler, who was actually recruited straight into the Oklahoma system, signed, didn't go anywhere else initially. First quarterback there in 6 years since Trevor Knight.
Yep.
Jalen Hurts obviously takes, in addition to improved passing throughout his career, as he developed as a passer, 1,300 yards and 20 touchdowns. Spencer Rattler, from what we understand, is mobile, but maybe hard-pressed to replicate that kind of running ability.
Yeah, I think from when you look at Spencer Rattler, it's more of, kind of in the Baker Mayfield, kind of fold, if you will. He is mobile, but he's not mobile to run. He's mobile to buy himself a little bit more time in the pocket to look downfield. He's absolutely more of a pro style, prototypical passer, certainly down the field, especially a lot different than, the offense will probably take a lot more of a look of a Baker Mayfield and a Kyler Murray type of offense as opposed to what we saw last year with Jalen Hurts. Lincoln Riley had to tweak the offense quite a bit to fit Jalen Hurts' style, more to your point, Mark, more of a kind of almost like a 50-50 guy in terms of passing and throwing. He ran the ball. I think he ran for, I think you mentioned that, and also over 1,200 yards last year, maybe even over 1,300 yards on the ground. But yeah, you'll see, I think you'll see more of the kind of the typical drop back passing situation that you've been accustomed to seeing under Oklahoma. And, I think, with all respect to Tanner Mordecai, I think Lincoln Riley will say it's a competition up until the start of the season. But I think the line in the sand was drawn. I think even last year a lot of people thought. There was people clamoring for late in the year for Spencer Rattler to kind of get in the game get in some of these games a little bit, as Hurts was struggling a bit with his turnovers down the stretch for Oklahoma. But be that as may, I think, like I said, Riley will make sure to articulate from a media perspective that this is an open competition. But I think one of the things that was really more of a kind of a telltale sign that you saw late in the game against the semifinals against LSU last year, where you saw Spencer Rattler, who was deemed the third string quarterback last year. He was the first guy that came off the bench late in there in the fourth quarter against LSU in garbage time, where you can read a little bit into that, or you can, kind of, Riley said after the game was over that, if they would have got another possession there in the fourth quarter, then that Mordecai was going to get his chance. But really the fact that Rattler got in there before Mordecai was pretty telling, just to get him a little bit of actual real game reps. He played a little bit. I think he threw 11 passes throughout the year. But when you looked at in the time that he played versus the time that Tanner Mordecai played, you could tell that the offense just ran a little smoother. The ball just comes out of his hand a little bit different, a little bit better, and you would expect that. He was the number one quarterback in the country coming out of high school in Arizona. So you have to think that the Oklahoma offense will be more prototypical to what Riley has had. And the offense was good last year. Obviously, I think we all know that there was a bit of deficiencies from Hurts, and no one expected him really to be Mayfield. No one expected him to be in the same class that Murray was. But he did throw 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. But I think you'll see you won't see as much quarterback run the game. You won't see as much read option as well out of Oklahoma this year.
So Spencer Rattler, the next in line in this succession of Oklahoma quarterbacks that we have come to know are going to produce points based on the Lincoln Riley system. But as Jason points out, 6 feet, 190 pounds, 200 pounds approximately. Not a huge kid and not a running quarterback, but certainly mobile enough. As you mentioned, expect a Baker Mayfield kind of mobility back there, looking to pass first, but definitely can threaten the defense. Trying to pick up first downs with his legs, and also can make all the throws. Number one quarterback rated in the country, as you mentioned, with a capable backup. In regards to talent, certainly in sophomore Tanner Mordecai. So when we flip to wide receiver, Jason, CeeDee Lamb's gone, and that's a huge loss. But this wide receiver core can take hits because it's arguably the best and the deepest in the country, and Charleston Rambo, obviously the most experienced, coming back with 43 catches.
Yeah, I think, Mark, if you would, kind of poll an OU fan, you would probably see that the wide receiver is probably the biggest question mark on the offensive side of the ball, which I think that's kind of a testament to what Riley's been able to build on that side of the ball. Obviously losing CeeDee Lamb is going to be a huge blow for that team, for this team. I think he had over 1,400 yards, first round draft pick, Dallas Cowboys. We all kind of know the story there. Charleston Rambo probably will be the first guy. He'll probably be asked to be the leader of that group. I think where you'll probably see a difference this year, Mark, is you'll see more of a committee approach. It was Lamb was the highest. In terms of reception, highest kind of regarded receiver on the team in terms of receptions, as well as yardage and touchdowns. But then you had Rambo there as well. Oklahoma's had a few injuries and suspensions that will, it might kind of hurt their depth. Jaden Hazelwood, who was a one of the biggest recruits that Oklahoma has had at the wide receiver position over the last 15, 20 years. He tore his ACL here probably about 3 weeks ago. A month ago, just preseason drills. So that's going to be a blow for Oklahoma. Trajan Bridges, who was another 5-star wide receiver, played a little bit last year, kind of in spot duty as a freshman. He was part of the suspensions leading up to the playoff semifinals. So he'll, I know that's under, kind of under advisement just in terms of how long that suspension is going to last. I know Oklahoma has appealed that suspension. It was 6 games, so if he's looking at being out 5 games this year possibly. So I think that's maybe where a little bit of the concern comes from a depth perspective. Look for Theo Weiss, who played a little bit, was pretty instrumental in the first Baylor game. CeeDee Lamb was out with an injury in that game, and Theo Weiss had a touchdown, had about 4 or 5 catches in that game, played pretty well, kind of thrust into duty that he wasn't necessarily prepared for. He's one, and then they'll probably rely on a couple of just to provide some depth, a couple of grad transfer at the wide receiver position. Theo Howard comes in from UCLA, which is kind of interesting that he tore his Achilles very early on after he came to OU, or I think it was in the January-February timeframe. But he has basically come out, and Oklahoma has come out to say they expect him to be here, be ready for whenever kind of whenever the fall practice starts, and then be ready for the first part of the season. He was injured all of last year for UCLA. For his career has over 100 catches, over 1,000 yards. So a pretty dependable wide receiver when he's been able to play. Another graduate transfer, and this was a little bit more of a surprise late. I think this Riley felt that they had a need from a depth perspective. So Obialo, he's a graduate transfer from Marshall. He was injured for 8 games last year, but he played the last 4 games, had over 244 yards receiving. So if you equal that out, kind of into a full season, he's got about 60 catch, 800 yard, kind of plateau that he set there. So I think with those guys, from a depth perspective, then you also got at the tight end and H-back position, you got they're young there as well. So you're probably looking at Austin Stogner being the starting tight end. He's very highly recruited as well. He was kind of among that four trio with Bridges and Theo Weiss and Hazelwood. So he'll probably be our starting tight end this year. A lot of people expect good things out of him. He's got a body it's more of a kind of a prototypical wide receiver body that I think he's built to more of a tight end. Very, when you look at him, he's very much like Mark Andrews, kind of from a height perspective. Maybe doesn't have the bulk that Andrews had, but he'll probably slide in there as a tight end. So even though there's a lot of talent there's a lot of unproven talent, and so I think there's a little bit of a question from a depth perspective there.
Yeah, as you allude to, Howard coming in, 56 and 51 catches his final 2 years at UCLA before missing 2019. And the distinction should be made. I kind of led you into the conversation on the wide receivers that, the talent is top end.
Right.
And if everybody's healthy, there's like 6-7 guys that could turn out to be highly productive wide receivers at this level. They have tremendous high school pedigrees, and then with Rambo and Howard, they've obviously done it at this level. But you've got an inordinate amount of injuries for guys that haven't played that much, that are very early in their careers, and then also most of them are unproven to a certain extent in the Big 12. Got Jason Ray on the line from Last Word on College Football, breaking down Oklahoma's roster for us. Of course, you want to keep it locked in here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Subscribe, turn on the bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live, as we do almost every day. The offensive line has been noted as one of the best in the business, regardless of losses to personnel groupings over the past several years. Just because of recruiting and development, it's just been a mainstay in college football. Do you expect that type level of play to continue in 2020?
Yeah, I think so, Mark. Coming into 2019, the offensive line was really the biggest question mark. They'd lost four of the 5 offensive linemen last year to the NFL, whereas this year it looks like it might be the strongest unit on the offensive side of the ball. All 5 starters return. They're headlined by the center Creed Humphrey, who all signs kind of indicated that he could have possibly been the first-round draft pick. Wanted to come back for a chance to win that playoff game and/or national championship this year. So having all 5 of those guys returning, plus having kind of Creed Humphrey, and you got a lot of recruits that will challenge. There's a couple of guys that you look specifically at the tackle position, at the left tackle, Stacy Wilkins, who redshirted last year. He's probably going to be in a pretty big battle on the left, at that left tackle position, battling Eric Swinson. Swinson was a starter. He was kind of injured off and on throughout the year. There were a little bit of questions just in terms of his kind of ability to get off the ball from a speed rush perspective, that he struggled with it from time to time last year. But yeah, the cupboard's really full on the offensive line, and I think that's very key when you're breaking in. There's a lot of newness. As we kind of talked a little bit before, Mark, in the last segment, that the receivers are talented, but they are very unproven, and you absolutely have an unproven quarterback as well. So having a really solid offensive line that he'll be able to lean on early in the year, especially, will be key. The schedule doesn't necessarily lend itself to getting. You don't have a lot of cupcakes in terms of just kind of getting them together. They do travel to Army. They host Tennessee in the preseason, or in the non-conference. So not a whole lot of time to kind of get players up to speed. Got to get ready to go pretty soon. But I think that offensive line gives them a chance to kind of gel a little bit more early on than maybe they would have last year.
Yeah, 5 starters back, and Bill Bedenbaugh, reputation as one of the best in the business. Certainly a combination that would bode well, you would think, for protecting Spencer Rattler and getting those running backs some room, which we can turn to them. you almost have to mention the Jalen Hurts productivity taken out of the rushing attack, 1,300 yards, 20 touchdowns. Kennedy Brooks comes back, may have more opportunities because the quarterback's not going to run as much. He gained 1,000 yards. Trey Sermon off to Ohio State. And Ramondre Stevenson, though, will miss 5 games out of the chute.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how how Riley is going to play that early on in the year. Riley has, since he's been at Oklahoma the first year as offensive coordinator, and then head coach the last few years, he's always relied on more of a 2-back system. His first year was Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine. Then he had Rodney Anderson and Trey Sermon. Then the last couple of years, it's been Trey Sermon and Kennedy Brooks. So it'll be, like I said, it'll be interesting if he still goes with that 2, more kind of almost a 50-50 split from a 2 running back approach. He's always went with that mentality, really just kind of whoever has the hot hand. Trey Sermon has typically over the last few years been more of the finisher, more of kind of the bruising power running back that finishes the games pretty strong for Oklahoma. But you absolutely have Kennedy Brooks as last 2 years he's been a 1,000-yard rusher. I think right behind him you'll probably see TJ Pledger get quite a bit of playing time early on, just to see what that fit looks like. Averaged about 6 yards a carry last year, I believe, in limited time. But as you mentioned, Trey Sermon's off to Ohio State. Ramondre Stevenson will conceivably miss the first 5 games of the year. So heavy reliance on Kennedy Brooks, I think, early on, and a couple of a redshirt freshman by the name of Marcus Major might get some looks early on. And Oklahoma got a blow early in the year, just from a recruiting standpoint. They had a big 5-star guy that had been committed to Oklahoma for a couple of years, and they lost him late in the recruiting cycle. But they do have another running back by the name of Seth McGowan. He kind of, from a measurable perspective, he's more of a kind of a Samaje Perine type of guy, low to the ground, a lot of lower body strength. So, not sure if he'll be ready to compete, but he may be asked to compete a little bit early in the season before Ramondre Stevenson gets back, if that 5-game suspension does hold in this year.
McGowan, the 14th rated running back in the nation, coming out of high school, 20th rated player out of Texas, a top 133 player according to the 247 Sports Composite, again out of Mesquite, Texas. Jason Ray breaking down Oklahoma personnel on offense for you, getting us all set for 2020 for the Sooners. Jason, we appreciate you stopping by.
All right, great. Thanks, Mark, for having me.